All right, we are talking about intentional coaching, and now we are to the why. So we kind of pick up, review a little bit of what we covered last time, and then kind of give you a look ahead as to what we're talking about today. So the what of the workout is always going to be the most important, right? That's why you get paid. That's why people come to your classes, is to show up with the what. So I don't want you to think that starting with the what is wrong or incorrect or I'm not doing it right. That is the essence of why people come to you. So you should always have the what. But when we start transitioning to teaching and coaching clients, instead of just randomizing workouts for them, we become more meaningful in their life of movement and in the pursuit of what they want to do long term, their athletic longevity. So when we looked at those basic postpartum movement patterns, now you can kind of start to see how those foundational movements and understanding them helps you recognize patterns in real life. So when are they practicing this hinging, this squatting, this push strength? For example, it's winter. We just got a big winter storm here in South Carolina. And so I was using a lot of push mechanics with the shovel across my driveway, right? So all of those push mechanics that I work on in the gym and in my workouts now suddenly became very relevant to real life. So when we make those connections for them, their workouts become much more meaningful rather than burn calories or get a good score on my watch or deplete myself or sweat it out, or for even things like for my mental health, right? When we connect it to movements that they're going to need in their real life, it becomes more meaningful to them. So right now you're probably looking at the what, why, how. Eventually we're going to reorder those and you're going to try to do why, what, how. So again, we're still starting. And today, as you work through it and in the next couple of sessions and coaching sessions as you practice this, you're still going to start with the what, but now we're going to extrapolate a why, and you're going to have that in your mind as you're working through the workouts, choosing exercises and explaining movement patterns. So let's just briefly go over those 8 basic postpartum movement patterns. You have your push, pull, squat, hinge, rotation and anti-rotation, carry, and then impact absorption. So when you're looking at bigger movements like a Turkish get-up, for example, you can pull out various movement patterns that are needed to then bring together into a Turkish get-up, right? So now your Turkish get-up is not just working on a Turkish get-up, but it's working on an overhead push, squat, and anti-rotation. There's a lot of things involved in the Turkish get-up, but that's a big example. I'm going to add this in. So we also talked in the last class about programming 101, start with your compound movements and add in your accessory movements. I'm going to give you some basic accessory mobility for postpartum clients. So this would be, again, in support of those compound movements or those bigger movement patterns in life. These are basic accessory patterns. So you could structure a whole class around basic, like an accessory to some of the larger movement patterns. And then you're describing and utilizing some of these things. So our hip internal and external rotation is going to provide pelvis and femur stability and support for the pelvic floor. So when that pelvic floor doesn't have to be quite as tense, it can actually rely on some of the other supported units, then it's able to actually have more mobility and more responsiveness and tension to task. Hip adduction and abduction, AD and abduction at the hip, again, for the same reasons. Pelvic floor mobility, and this is the ability to reach relaxation and activation. So it's accessing different levels of activation depending on the task at hand. So we don't just want it to be an on or off. We want to actually respond at different levels and different areas of activation. Rib cage mobility, so it's the ability to expand and use that 360 breath. Scapular mobility, so moving our shoulder blades in isolation of themselves, it allows for us to make adjustments to support the rib cage and the breathing mechanics. Finally, spinal segmentation, which is adjusting different parts of the spine practicing that unloaded and lightly loaded. So we can make adjustments when we are doing things that are more loaded. We have access to those movements. We have familiarity with making adjustments at different segments of our spine rather than the whole thing shifting. These are actually going to be wrapped up into an accessory mobility for postpartum clients package with all sorts of ideas of how to add this into your class and just routines that you can kind of work through yourself. So be looking for that. You're still working on this what? So you are still down here, series 1, 2, and 3, perhaps 4. You're still planning your what of the workout. Now we're going to add in your intention or your theme. So once you get your what, once you've decided on your workout, you're going to look at your 8 basic movement patterns and you can extrapolate or pull out something that you want to work on, something that you want the class to be driven by. That doesn't mean that the entire class has to be all of that, but it helps drive your communication and helps you draw a theme or a thread. So your workout becomes a concise story, right? They can understand where you were going, beginning, middle, and end, versus this kind of randomized selection of exercising. So we're going to start by extrapolating kind of one of those 8 basic movement patterns. So let's say you have your what of a workout and you're looking through there and you're saying, oh, there's deadlifts. So your intention or theme, you can pull up to the top here and you can say, I'm going to talk about hinge mechanics. So now in your conversation with your clients, in your cueing, it's going to become about hinge mechanics. And when do you introduce that? Every one of you has probably a generic warm-up that you do. You probably have a basic warm-up that is what you do every time. Maybe you switch it up a little bit here and there. Maybe you kind of do what feels good in that morning or in that afternoon class, like what's a little stiff. What I want you to do is during this warm-up, start to use that intention and theme to create to add into your warm-up some explanation and then add in a specific warm-up. So it might mean taking away from some of your normal run-of-the-mill warm-up, but in this specific warm-up is a great opportunity to introduce your intention or your theme or your learning objective and start to get them thinking about that. So let's say it is hinge mechanics. So you're going to do some generic warm-up and then you're going to come to a specific warm-up that would be specific to hinging. Start introducing some of the cues you're going to use. Start introducing them to an unloaded position. Start making those manipulations, some of those cues that you might want them to recognize later, have them practice in this specific warm-up. And that's going to be your opportunity to get them thinking about why they're there today. Hinge mechanics, let's say. So another example might be if you're doing some renegade rows, right? Let's say you have some renegade rows. Now think about the difference of describing a renegade row from a pull perspective, right? Maybe if your intention or the theme for the class is pull mechanics, that's going to be a different explanation, some different cues, some different targets for them to create with that renegade row, versus if your intention or your theme is anti-rotation, you're going to be talking about 2 kind of different sensations in the body, maybe some different cues, maybe some different modifications and amplifications, right? Which comes later. So having this intention of theme is not only going to drive your language, it's also going to start to drive your modifications and amplifications, because everything can tie back to that intention or your theme. So this time, for the next couple of coaching sessions, look at your what, extrapolate, pull out a movement pattern that you'd like to focus on, put it as your intention and your theme, devise your generic warm-up, and then also look at your specific warm-up and try to tie in your intention and your theme into that specific warm-up and start to introduce some of the concepts that you're about to share, that you're about to cue with your clients. So let's talk about this learning objective, this intention or theme. What is she talking about? It doesn't have to be super complicated. It should be clear and concise, so you should be able to explain it in 1 or 2 sentences. And if you can, you want to connect it with a movement pattern or a skill clients use or aspire to. So I think we can all agree that we don't necessarily use handstands in everyday life, but that might be a skill that your clients are aspiring to. Same thing with the Turkish get up. It has a lot of great movements in it, but that might not be something that they're like using in everyday life, but that might be a skill that they want. They want to improve their Turkish get up, or they want to increase the load that they are carrying in their Turkish get up. So you don't have to stick straight to those movement patterns, but when we can kind of connect what we're doing in class to something that they're doing outside of class, or something that they want to do outside of class, it makes more sense to them. They're more motivated, and then they make those aha moments in real life when they're getting up off the floor and they're like, oh, that felt different because I'm getting up differently. Yeah. So I'm going to give you some examples of some intentions or themes of classes and learning objectives. So if it was just a movement pattern, right? Upper body push or pull, squatting or hinging mechanics. It could also be something like your rotation, anti-rotation. Any of those movement patterns could work. It could also be something a little bit broader. So something like breath work and jumping, right? So if you have some jumping mechanics, then you might want to progressively introduce those throughout the workout. Maybe dynamic movements like something like run mechanics. Co-contraction, which is the muscles around a joint are contracting while we're moving and running. Think about, like, we need that stability of our knee joint, right? Like also while we're moving. So you might want to practice that or use that as a concept of your workout. And then you're going to be talking about that. Coordination of systems. So our diaphragm and our pelvic floor, how are they working together to like optimally support the systems and the movements? You could also talk about concepts like a perceived rate of exertion, right? Providing them with a scale. And then throughout class, you're kind of going back to that intention and theme. What am I talking about? Oh, my perceived rate of exertion. Here, I'm going to talk about that. How do they know that they're reaching their limit? How do they know that they're ready for an amplification? Or it could be something like teamwork and community building. That is a great learning objective or a theme or an intention. Again, they don't have to be overly complicated, but they're going to drive the way you communicate, and they're going to drive how your clients ultimately end up walking away from that workout. With these examples, we can break them up into categories. So it might be movement patterns, accessory work, or other. So here they are kind of broken up. Movement patterns, like I was talking about, these are like bigger picture movement patterns, but you can also do them as, you can also have intention or themes or learning objectives as accessory work and supporting those larger movement patterns and larger compound lifts, or it could be other, right? So if you're kind of struggling to find or extrapolate something from your workout, kind of go back to this work. Is it a movement pattern that I want to target? Is it accessory work that I want to target or other else or something else? In the other category, you could have something like a theme workout. Maybe it's somebody's birthday. Maybe it's a holiday. Those are still really important. It could also be you just want them to have fun. So maybe it's a workout with lots of games and interaction, right? These are still really important things to be providing your group. But again, it's going to drive your communication and it's going to drive your workout. One thing to think about here as well is the same workout could work for different themes and learning objectives. So one thing that I love coaches to do is to coach the same workout twice or 3 times with different learning objectives and challenge themselves to change their communication, change the way they're explaining things. Again, it's like that renegade row, coming at it from this pull perspective versus an anti-rotation perspective. How is that going to change what you provide for your clients? How is that going to change the accessory work that you're doing, right? The accessory work in an anti-rotation becomes more of a single-sided load, creating tension from your toes to your shoulders in that plank position. The modifications and amplifications change, right? Because now you're working on this anti-rotation versus a pull where it's, that posterior chain movement where your weight may come to your hip, drawing it back, your shoulder stability, right? Those are going to be different amplifications and modifications that you can offer. So even if you're taking the same workout and you're kind of approaching it from different angles with different explanations, again, you're just going to broaden their connection to real life. So in these next couple of coaching sessions, you're extrapolating a why, you're pulling out a why, and you're going to keep that focus throughout the workout. And maybe it might change the workout a little bit because again, we're kind of starting with the what and going to the why. But that's okay. That's okay. Because when you're evaluating a workout from a single-sided load perspective, things might need to shift. And again, that helps your clients connect to real life. So enjoy your coaching this week. Next session, which will be our last session, we have the what, and you're going to start focusing on your why and introducing your why in that specific warm-up time when you have a little bit of an opportunity to, when they're kind of focused on you, right? You kind of have their attention. It's the beginning of class. They're ready to go. Instead of trying to offer that information in the workout can be a little bit, they're already thinking about too much. They're thinking about rep counts or time, or they're simply tired, right? So the specific warm-up is going to be your time to kind of introduce that. Happy coaching. Let me know how it goes.